So today we are going to discuss about the what is a tabular model, and then later we are discussing about Power BI. Okay, so this training is dedicated for purely under the analysis services. Basically we have two models, multi-dimensional modeling, and the second one is tabular modeling. So this multi-dimensional modeling we have in the SQL Server BI software from almost 2005, and this tabular model was introduced in the 2010 only. So earlier we don't have any tabular model. So you know very well, right? So where we are going to create this multi-dimensional modeling and where we are going to create the tabular modeling. So 2012, after you were installing the SQL Server and the SQL Server data tools. Earlier it is a business intelligence development studio, and now it is SQL Server data tools, right? So these SQL Server data tools, when you are going to install, it will ask you your analysis services you are going to install in which mode. You have to choose any of one in single instance. In your machine, when you are going to install a SQL Server analysis services, whatever, either it is a SQL Server, each time whenever you are installing a single instance, right? If it is the first time if you are installing, that is by default the instance name is MS SQL Server, and more than one time if you want to install, you have to give the instance name is different instance names. You can give any names for the instance name. So the first time when you are going to install the SQL Server analysis services, the instance name and the mode for analysis services you are installing is multi-dimensional, right? So you have to choose either it is a multi-dimensional mode or tabular mode. Okay, so if you are installing in a multi-dimensional mode, so then you can't use the tabular mode. If you don't have a tabular mode installation, you can't use the tabular mode. For example, so I will show you so what kind of error it is throwing if you are installing your SQL Server data tools in analysis services multi-dimensional mode. Okay, right. So then later I will jump into what is the tabular model and what is the difference when comparing with the multi-dimensional model and tabular model, how the tabular model is working, the processing of the data and the way it is storing the data. Okay, right. See, for example, if I want to create a project under analysis services, I'm going to create a new project. You just click on the new project. If you observe here, there are two kind of modes we have. So you are going to create the project in multi-dimensional mode or analysis services tabular mode. Okay, so this is the 2012, right? So in 2012 you can find out a tabular model also. Earlier, before 2012, we don't have this option analysis services tabular project, right? So for example, actually this installation I did in analysis services multi-dimensional and data mining mode. But now if I want to create a project under analysis services tabular project, so the project name I'm going to give the SSAS tabular. So in this location I'm going to save this project. You just click OK. So what I did here, I have installed this SQL Server analysis services two times, two instances. One is the default one, MS SQL Server. The second one is, so the first time when I am installing the SQL Server in the default instance MS SQL Server is multi-dimensional model I have selected. Okay. The second time when I am installing these analysis services, the instance name I have given just my name REM. That time I have selected the mode of the analysis services installation is analysis services. It is tabular mode. Okay, so if you want to check that services, as you can check the services, or you can directly go to all programs, go to the configuration tools, SQL Server configuration manager. Okay, see, if you observe here, these are all the services running under my machine, all the services related to SQL Server only. Okay, so what is this one? SSIS, and this is SQL Server. This is running under which instance? MS SQL Server. This is the first time I have installed, and this is analysis services, MS SQL Server. So this installation I did for multi-dimensional mode, and this is SSRS. Okay, so later I have installed the SQL Server analysis services. See here, the instance name is, I have given a different instance name, but the default instance name I have selected the first time when I am installing is MS SQL Server. The second time I am installing the analysis services only for selecting the tabular mode, because the first time I have selected multi-dimensional mode. The second time I have selected tabular mode. Okay, so that is the reason by default when I am creating this project, if you are selecting the tabular project, under which instance this server, under which instance the tabular mode you have created, it is automatically it is taking that instance. So this is the first time. If you don't have tabular model, you have installed the this analysis services in multi-dimensional mode. When you are going to create this project, it will ask you under which instance, under which server you are going to create this tabular model. So you have to give the server name and instance name, under which server and instance you have selected this tabular mode. If you are giving the multi-dimensional mode server, multi-dimensional server information and instance information, then it won't create the project. Okay, right. So you can install many number of times, right, in your computer the same software. So that is the reason I want only analysis services, particularly under tabular mode. So that is the reason I have installed only these services. Earlier I have SSIS, SSRS and SSAS and SQL Server. And the SSIS.
Hello, yeah, Ram. One second. One SQL Server, just a standalone instance,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And when you install the MS SQL Server, you can choose SSRS reporting services, analysis services, multidimensional, and SQL Server. Three things you can choose at a time, correct?
Right. So in the
Ah, ah,
next step, we have to select for the
yeah.
analysis services what mode you want to select. Analysis services mode,
Oh,
multi-dimensional mode, or tablet.
oh, okay, okay, fine. And okay, this SQL Server analysis services RAM instance can have SSIS also, correct? SSIS. I hope you got what I'm saying. So here you're not installing that SQL Server alone, right? It's only analysis services you're installing.
In the second installation, I didn't
Uh-huh.
install any SQL Server, any SSIS,
Hmm.
any SSRS. Only I have
Oh, okay, okay.
analysis services.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Fine, fine.
Okay.
So that SQL Server data tools itself is a package which installs the SQL Server Management Studio and everything, is it? SQL Server data instance?
Yeah.
SQL Server,
That's depend.
uh,
That depends what software you have installed. If you want to install, if you want to download the entire package, yes, we have. That includes SQL Server, Management Studio, SSIS,
uh-huh.
okay, SSRS,
Okay.
and SSAS. Or if you want to download only SQL Server Management Studio, yes, you can download that one also. Or if you want to if you want to download the entire package SSIS, SSRS, SSAS, that is SSAT, you can download. You can't
Oh,
download only SSIS, only SSRS, only SSAS.
oh, okay, okay. This is server or client? The SQL Server Management Studio, which is there in SQL Server Data Tools, is just the tool which accesses the server, or
Yes,
uh,
yes, we
we?
have that option also. We have that option also. SQL Server
Oh, okay,
Management Studio is a client to
okay,
interact
okay.
with the database engine server.
Yeah, yeah,
For example, in your company, they have installed some SQL Server in their servers. Okay,
yeah.
and
Okay,
from your computer, you want to connect to that particular server, and you want to access
yeah,
the database. So what you require? You require SQL Server Management Studio, right?
yeah, yeah.
So already the server is there, and the server means the database engine.
Okay.
So that database engine is there. So then what you have to do? You need a client to access this database engine.
Yeah.
So in that situation, you have to install the SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. So you just download the SQL Server Management Studio as well, and you can install in your computer. And when you are going to connect to the server, whatever the server already installed on your company server, that information you have to provide to connect. The SQL Server Management Studio is a client tool. You can connect to any servers if you have the proper server name, username, password. Clear? Right. But if you are coming to the SQL Server data tools, it's a complete package, a combination of SSIS, SSRS, SSAS. Three services will come. Once you are downloading the SQL Server data tools, it will give SSIS, SSRS, SSAS. But when you are going to install the SQL Server data tools, you can select any of one service, either SSIS or SSRS, SSAS. Under SSAS, you have to select under which mode you want to install the software analysis services. It is a multi-dimensional mode
Okay.
or tabular mode.
Okay, and the SQL Server Management Studio you install the SQL Server database that also could be installed. The server itself can be installed with SQL Server data tools. That is what is my question.
That is I'm telling. So that depends on based on your download. If you are downloading
Okay,
the entire package,
okay,
entire package means combination of SQL Server data tools as well as SQL Server.
okay,
For example, in my computer, I have one download. I will show you. See, this is the SQL Server 12. Okay, so this I have
hmm.
downloaded from the somewhere. Okay, so this is the dot setup.exe. If I'm clicking on this to install the software, it will ask you what you want to install: SQL Server, SQL Server Management Studio, Database Engine, and SSIS, SSRS, and SSAS. All will come in
Okay,
single package. If you want to download only SQL Server data tools, that is related to SSIS, SSRS, and SSAS. And if you want to install only
hmm.
database engine on SQL Server Management Studio, you can install. You have to
That is server. That is server itself.
yes server.
Client or server, how to select?
That is a database engine is separately there. data
Oh yeah, right.
engine is there. Okay,
Okay.
right,
Database engine, if you select, that is directly you are installing the SQL Server. If you are installing SQL Server Management Studio,
right.
that is the
Client,
client, right?
yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
right.
Fine.
So
Right. Okay.
depends on the what kind of mode you are selecting. So it will install the
Hmm.
as under
Hmm.
SSAS, tabular or multidimensional.
Okay.
And one more thing is when you are installing the SQL Server SSIS or SQL Server data analysis integration services, if you are installing the first time under the instance MS SQL Server, okay. The second time again you are going to install the SSIS and SSRS. Okay, I have installed the SQL Server data tools. Under these data tools, three services are there: IS, AS, RS. I have installed three times. So this SSAS you will get three times, SSRS you will get three times, but SSIS always only one time. You don't install multiple times. Always the integration services is only one time. Check over here. I have installed the analysis services two times, right? Under MS SQL Server instance and RAM. So both are two times the services are coming under the two different instances. But integration services, if you are installing more than one time, two times, three times, four times, five times, even though it will install only one service in your computer. How many packages, how many projects you are creating under SSIS, all will run under single service only, but analysis services will run under two services or whatever. But SSRS, yes, you can run under different services, but integration services is always only one service. That is the reason, if you observe, it is not belonging to any instance. Remaining all services are belongs to some other instances, right? Analysis services belongs to MS SQL Server. Reporting services belongs to MS SQL Server. Again, I have installed SSAS. It is belongs to different instance, but SSIS integration services is not belong to any. Okay, so that is one point. Right. So now come to here. When you are installing the analysis services, you have to select the multidimensional or tabular model. So which one you have to select? And when we are going to choose the multidimensional modeling, and when we are going to choose the tabular modeling. So definitely that is your based on the your project requirement. So before you are going to create a project, or how can you decide which model is suitable for our project? Multidimensional model or tabular model? So if you want to decide that thing, first you have to know what are the features we have in the multidimensional and what are the features in the tabular model, and what is the advantage of the multidimensional modeling and what is the advantage of the tabular modeling. So one simple thing to decide which model you have to choose is the size of your database. If your database size is in terabytes, okay, if your database size is in terabytes, then simply you can go to multi-dimensional modeling. I will tell you the reason. And if your database is in gigabytes, up to 1 terabyte, yes, up to 1 terabyte, you can go to the tabular model. If your database is greater than 1 terabyte, definitely you have to choose multi-dimensional modeling. Okay, what is the reason? The reason is the tabular model is a in memory. The multi-dimensional is not an in-memory model, right? So this multi-dimensional will store all the data in your disk. I will show you the, see, based on your data size. For example, if your database size is up to 24 terabytes, yes, you can go to the multi-dimensional model. And if your database is up to 1 terabyte, mostly in gigabytes, yes, you can choose the tabular model. Okay, and in these hardware resources, if you are coming to the hardware resources point of view, the multi-dimensional will use the memory, CPU, and disk input out. What is a disk input output? So when you are comparing with the multi-dimensional and tabular modeling, only the memory and CPU is the common thing, but the disk input output is the more usage in the multi-dimensional, because the tabular model is a in memory and the data it will store in the memory of the analysis services. It no need to every time the requests, normally input output means if you want something you have to send some request and that will give some response, request response. So the request and response depends on the your disk input output, the performance of the IO processes. Input output, what is the input, the request, and what is the output, what is the response. So that really required in the multidimensional, because the data is in disk. Your analysis services cube will store the data in disk. So every time your reporting required, you have to write down some MDX query. So we are sending an MDX request to the disk or analysis services. It has to read the data and it will give the response. So this is input, this is output process. But in a tabular modeling, you don't require that one. We don't write anything to the disk. That is in the memory only, in memory. I will tell you what exactly the process and what kind of engine it is using in the backend. Okay, right. So the query language we are using under the multidimensional is MDX. Under the tabular model is we are using DAX only. We are not using MDX. We are using the DAX. So this is a language. So normally we are calling this language is a M language. So whatever the expressions you are writing in your Excel. So normally we are writing some functions, lookup functions, whatever. So the language we are using inside the Excel, the same language, it's similar to DAX language. If you are good in the Excel, then that language is very easy to learn. Okay, so that is the one difference between this multi-dimensional and tabular model. And if you are coming to the query performance, this MDX is also fast and this is also fast. Both are fast, but the language is difficult to learn and to write for your requirement is MDX, but the DAX is very easy to write down. And the model complexity also very complicated, this multi-dimensional, if you observe. Okay, so the multi-dimensional definitely it's a more complex. If you observe here, when you are creating a multi-dimensional model, you will get more number of options and more number of things there. But in the tabular model, nothing is there. It's very simple compared to the multi-dimensional model, right? And if you are coming to the security part, in multi-dimensional, you can create the security on the row level and cell level. But in the tabular model, you can create only row level. So what is the row level and cell level? For example, I want to give in a particular table I have sales information, and the sales, for example, this is a transaction table. So in this is the whole entire database for my banking system. I want to give access to the all the transactions in any location, any city, anywhere, whatever the transactions are happening, those will come and store into this table. I want to give access to this particular database table data to regional managers. So a manager is belongs to a particular region. I want to give access to that particular person only to access the transactions related to that particular region only. Okay. So in that situation, whatever the rows, whatever the transactions belongs to particular region, so you have to give the security for that only. So that is possible in the tabular as well as multi-dimensional. The cell level means in a particular table, in a particular column, in a particular cell. For example, the currency rate for USD. What is the today currency rate for the United States? I want to give the access only for that particular cell only. So that kind of things possible in the multi-dimensional but not in the tabular. So you can give the access level, security level only for row level only, not on the cell level in the tabular model. Okay. And the typical development effort. So as a developer, so how much effort you have to put on this particular multi-dimensional tabular. So definitely I can say the tabular model is very easy to compare with the multidimensional model. There are a lot of things are involved in the multidimensional. You have to create the schema and you have to create a cube, dimensions and facts, and there is a inside the relationships and KPIs. Yes, the KPIs we have in tabular as well as, okay, in tabular we have KPIs, and here also we have KPIs, and here also we have partitions, and here also we have partitions, and we don't have one option is translations. What do you mean by translations? In multi-dimensional we can convert the language of the data, any regional language, any kind of language you can convert the cube, but in the tabular model we don't have that option. Okay. And here it is aggregations. No, we don't have uh, much aggregations in the tabular model. Okay. And the next one is perspectives. What is a perspective? Perspective is nothing but it's a mini cube. We have created one cube in the dimensional modeling, and inside that if you want to select only particular dimensions and particular facts, and you want to create like a small cube and you want to use that for a particular person, so you want to give the access. So that option we don't have in the tabular model. Okay. And here MDX, it is a DAX. So there is a lot of features are missing, but not necessary those things in the tabular model. So that is the reason it is very easy to develop a tabular model. Okay. And the licensing part, yes, all in all the versions you will get the multi-dimensional cube, but in the tabular only you will get in business intelligence and enterprise editions only. What is an edition? We have different kind of editions in our SQL Server BI, right? And we have different versions. What is a version and what is an edition? A version is when the first time you have introduced your SQL Server, 2000, 2005, 2008, 2008 R2, and 2012, 2014, 2016. This is the recent version. The current version is 2016. What is the edition? So in each version there are different editions: business intelligence edition and enterprise edition, standard edition, express edition. only you will get this tabular model in these two editions only. Okay, but this multi-dimensional model you will get in all the editions. Okay, so these are the major differences between the multi-dimensional versus tabular model, right? So inside this tabular model, what is the speciality of the tabular model?
So, Ram, you are saying that the data is physically stored in case of multidimensional, right? In the cube.
Yes, it will store the data physically in the disk.
In the disk space. Even if you have created the cube, it stores the data in the disk space. That is what you are saying, correct?
Yes.
And this is like
In memory, it will use the memory of the analysis services, like it's a RAM space it will use.
okay, fine, fine. Actually, in the current project which I am working, they're asking me what should be the database specification. Okay, I have received the source files, and based on it, they're creating a migration environment. They're asking me what should be the database size. So how should we decide on it, Ram? Like, what should it be? All the specifications. How can I decide?
Right. So, what is your source? From where you are getting?
Source is all. Yeah, source is all CSV files. There are around 700 files which has come in. Each file size I can let you know, like approximately how much it is.
So,
So,
so you are telling there are 700 CSV files. So
yeah,
it's a one-time process or it's a regular?
700 CS. It's a data migration project, so it's one time, right?
Just data migration project. So that we
Yeah.
decide once we are looking on the size of the data inside the each file, then we can decide.
Huh. Okay.
And
If it is every time daily upload, then how should we decide? The memory,
so
this
daily
one,
you don't get seven.
talking about.
Daily you don't get 700 files. This is the first time.
Okay.
This is the initial.
Okay.
So the initial load
Okay.
definitely have a much data. Then after, what is the capacity? I mean, what is the streaming like daily? How much size you will receive from the source system? That is different. Okay, for example, initially for these 700 CSV files data storage, for example, it is a 10 GB.
Yeah.
So then after this is one time loading. Then after regularly you
Mm.
are getting a daily 10 MB, 20 MB like that.
Mm.
So we have to decide based on that how much is required for the database.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Fine, fine,
because
fine.
regularly we don't get this much of size, right? This is a one time history data we are loading into this data.
Okay. Okay, fine, fine.
Like,
Yeah.
and
Sure, Ram. Okay.
some other things we missed in the tabular model comparing with the multi-dimensional model is many to many relationships is not possible in the tabular model. Okay, and also actions. In multi-dimensional model we have an actions in the sense when we are creating SSRS report, we have some actions, right? If you are clicking on somewhere, it will jump into another report. The same things you can implement in the multi-dimensional model actions as well, but it's not possible in the tabular model. Translations already I told, right? So if you want to convert the language, for example, this cube the people are going to use from Tamil Nadu or Kannada, whatever. They want that cube in their regional language. So yes, you can convert the language of the cube, like what is the table name, what is the attribute name, everything you can change. Inside the data you no need to change because the people already stored the data inside in the their regional language only. They can understand the data. But the headings, the attributes, the column names, dimension names, and fact measures names, you can change in the by converting the data as well, sorry, language. That is possible. And the write back option. In multi-dimensional, you have the option to write back. Write back means, so we have analysis services cube, and this cube will get the data from a particular data source, and you are browsing this cube from an Excel. So there is an option that is write back. You can, instead of browsing the data, and also you can write back data into the cube also. That is the write back option. In multi-dimensional, we have that option. And data mining also you can do. The data mining means some machine learning some algorithms we have. So those algorithms you can apply in the multi-dimensional modeling. You can create a data mining. You can find out more insights in the data, and you can predict the data. So these 4 months, this is the sales. What is the sales will come in the next month? Based on these 4 months data, it will predict and it will let you know approximately what is the sales will come. So that is one kind of prediction. And so if you want to do some categories, okay, so I have some sales information in regional wise, and so it will categorize the data and it will give some insights. So that is possible in the data mining in the multi-dimensional. We don't have this data mining inside the tabular model. So aggregations I told you, right? So it's not mandatory to store the aggregated value in the tabular. Okay, right. So how can we say this tabular model is more faster than the dimensional modeling? Because this tabular model, whatever the engine it is using to store the data and to process the data is, it's a vertipack engine. Vertipack in memory engine. So if you are going to the another picture, okay, so this is the picture, right? So we are calling that is a x velocity also. So this vertipack engine, how it is going to store the data? Normally we have 2 GB data in your source system. When you are going to create a cube and you are moving this data into a multi-dimensional model, the data size, how much you can expect? Definitely it is more than 2 GB. 2 GB data if you are loading into the multi-dimensional cube, definitely the data size in the multi-dimensional, it required the storage space is greater than 2 GB. May know the reason? Because it will store this RDBMS data as well as some aggregated data as well. It will do some aggregations, and if it is doing some extra calculations and aggregations, it needs some more space, right? So in the multi-dimensional, it will do some aggregations and it will store the aggregated data already inside the cube. So that is the reason it needs more space. So that is the reason we are not using the multi-dimensional is not using in-memory technique. It is difficult to store this much of space inside the in-memory, right? But in the tabular model, the same 2 GB of the data, same 2 GB of the data, if you are going to load into the tabular model, okay, so it will take 1/10 of the space only when you are moving over here, okay. It will occupy very less space. If you are using 2 GB, nearly it will use like 500 to 600 MB only. What is the reason? If you are transferring 2 GB of the data, but it is occupying only 500 to 600 MB only. You know the reason? Because of the vertipack storage mode. Okay, vertipack storage mode. Before we are going to discuss about this X velocity and vertipack storage mode, we have to discuss one thing in that was recently in 2012 they have introduced the column store indexes. What is a column to store index? Normally in SQL Server, how it is storing the data? I told you, right? The SQL Server the way it is storing the data is a row basis. Okay, row basis means when you are creating a table in the SQL server, and when you are inserting the data into a particular table, for example, employee number, employee name, salary. Okay, so when you are installing when you are inserting 10 rows into this table, how it will divide the memory, the disk space in the back end to store this data. It will divide and it will store the data each page wise. It will divide the data, whatever the data you are inserting, like a pages. Okay, so each page it will each page it 8 KB of the storage, and if you are combining 8 pages, it is called one extent. Okay, if you are combining 8 pages, simple, this is one extent. Inside this extent, you can divide this as a 8 pages. Whatever the data you are inserting into a table, that will come and store like a pages. For example, in this page, this is page 1. Okay, employee number, employee name, salary. So employee number 100, 200 and 300, and the employee name is whatever, Ram, Ro, Deepthi. The salary is 100, sorry, 1000, 2000 and 3000. Okay, so this is the page 1. In the page 2, so again you can page 2, you can copy the entire data. This is page 2 and it is a different data. For example, it is 400, 500 and 600, and one more page. So this way you can store the data, right? So now when you are writing a select query, simple like this, select star from the table name is EMP, not star. I want only 2 columns, employee number comma salary. This is the query. So when you are writing this SQL query, this SQL server query is going to ask the database engine. The database engine will take the data. How it will take the data? Here, first it will fetch all the data from all the pages. All the data like this way. From the first page, it will fetch these records, and from the second page, it will fetch these records. From the third page, it will fetch all the records into in memory. Okay, it will fetch all the records. Why it is fetching? You are asking only employee number and salary. So you can get a doubt. We are asking only employee number and salary column. So it has to take only this column and this column and this column and this column from each page. But in the olden the SQL server, the data it is storing is each row wise, not the column wise. It is not dividing the data column wise. So when you are going to fetch for what value? Employee number, this value, and salary, this value. So it will fetch the entire row. not the list of columns. So that is the reason it is fetching all, for example, 100 rows in your table. You are selecting for a particular employee number. What will happen? It will take the 100 rows into, 100 columns into in memory. Okay. So whenever you are writing a query, select star from, not star, select employee number salary, then it will get all the data into in memory. Then what are the columns it is required, then it will display those columns into your result set. So this is the old process, but whatever the X velocity engine was introduced newly in the tabular model, the X velocity engine, what it will do, so that will divide the data each column wise. Okay, that divide the data each column wise. So the best example I will show you. Only it will fetch whatever the columns you require. Okay, so this is the data it will fetch. You don't need to fetch all 100 columns from the table into in memory. That is old process. But now the new process is the X velocity engine, how it is processing the data. Only the respective columns, whatever you required, it will process only that particular columns. And I will show you one example. See here. Earlier, it will store the data each page wise. Page 1, page 2, page 3. For each page, only 8 KB of the data it will allow. So whatever the data you have inserted, if it is enough to 8 KB, then it will come to second page and third page. When you are writing a query, select make year from auto type the table name. So how it is fetching? It is fetching all the columns from the all the pages. See here, all the columns from the all the pages. All 3 pages fetched into memory. So this page and the second page and third page. So this is the final result will come into memory. All the data it will fetch from all the pages, and then whatever the data you have requested, I have requested make what model and what year. But in the new model, how it is going to process and how it is going to store the data. See here, the VertiPack engine, the X velocity engine is going to store the data each column wise. The column stored index, when you are creating a column stored index on a table, this you can apply in the SQL Server right now. Instead of clustered non-clustered indexes in the row wise, if you can create column wise indexes. When you are creating the column wise indexes, what it will do, it will divide the data into each column wise. And when you are writing a query, select make year from table, what will happen? Directly it will fetch whatever the column. You don't need to fetch all the data into memory. Then what are the required columns? It saves the performance also, right? Here you have 5 to 6 rows, that's enough. If you have millions of the records, in that situation, what will happen? So that is a problem, right? So this is about the column store indexes. If you are coming to the tabular model, you have a data like this way. In your source system, you have the data employee number, employee name, salary. This data I want to load into a tabular model. When you are loading this data, how it will store? Or for example, you have some transactional information data. The customer 100 and not this example. I will take customer ID and order quantity and amount. So the first customer 100 order quantity 2 and the amount is this amount whatever, or 10 rupees, and the second customer is 200, quantity is 3 and this is 20 rupees, and again the customer same customer 100 and 200 and here 300, 400. So this way the customers are data. I have some transactional data. So when you are going to store this data into the SQL server, tabular model, not SQL server, into tabular model, how it will store? The pack storage model is, it will encoding the data. It is not loading directly whatever the data you have and keep inside the tabular model. It will encode the data. What is the encode? Encode means here, for example, instead of customer ID, I want to take customer name. The customer name is Ram, Rohini, Deepthi. Again it is Ram, Deepthi and Rajesh. Okay. So these are the customers. When this customer name is going to load into this customer table, whatever the tabular modeling, how it is storing this entire this information into the tabular model is, it will encode the data. Simple. How it will encode the data? It will first take what are the distinct customers we have. RAM, Rohini and Deepthi. These are the three distinct customers we have. And instead of maintaining and instead of storing this new character string data, it will encode the data into 1, 2, 3. Who is 1? 1 is Ram and 2 is Rohini, 3 is Deepthi. It will encode the data and it will store in simple values, because the numeric values will take less memory comparing with the string data. And here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 entries for the customers. Why you are going to make 6 entries? Why you are going to store here 6 entries? It don't store 6 entries in the pack engine. The pack storage model, it will decode, encoding the data, whatever the data you are sending over here, in between it will encode and it will store the data, whatever the format is better format, whatever the best way to store the data. And even for numeric values also, for these numeric values also, it will store in for example if it is a decimal value 10.40, how it will store this 10.40. Okay, so instead of storing 10.40, it will store like 10.4. It will remove the decimal value point. It is better, right? It will take less storage. When again you are going to process this data from your tabular model to some other report by using DAX formulas or whatever, again it will decode the data. Why it is encoding the data? For better storage, for less storage space required. That is the reason it is encoding the data, and when you are going to browse that data, it will again decode and it will give the proper data. So that is the reason it is taking very less storage space comparing with the actual data. That is the usage of the vertipack storage model. And the X velocity means all the data whatever you have, it will store in the in memory. And in tabular model also there are two options we have. Whatever the data you have, for example data source, this one, and this data source you want to load into in memory. I will show you this picture, it will give clear idea. If you observe here, this is my tabular model. Okay, so in this tabular model, this is my reporting tool. Simple, for example Power BI, just assume. From Power BI I have written some DAX queries to get the data from this tabular, whatever. So what will happen? When it is going to contact the tabular model, and inside the tabular model there are two options. One is in memory, another one is direct query mode. Okay, in memory means all the data it will take from your data source and keep inside the in memory. Direct query mode means it don't take any data and it don't keep inside the in memory. Whenever you are going to browse a particular data, on the fly it will send a query to your source system and it will fetch the data. That is direct query mode. See here in the tabular model, this is my tabular model project, and you are using in memory mode. In memory mode means whatever the data you have in your source system. For example, this is my data warehousing SQL server. Here I have one data. You just assume this is a CSV files or whatever, or it's a Oracle database, anything. So that data, when you are creating a tabular project, if you are using the mode is in memory mode, what will happen? It will take the data and it will store into vertipack storage mode. It will encode the data when it is going to store into your tabular services, in memory services, right? So the storage mode is vertipack storage mode, and it will store in the in memory. The mode is in memory. So whatever the DAX query you have written, so it will, the tabular model is the top of the data and storage. It will take the data and it will give the response to Power BI tool. But inside this tabular model, the option instead of in memory, if you are using direct query mode, there are two modes, in memory mode, direct query mode. So what this direct query mode will do, it don't take any data from Oracle or SQL Server or your CSV file into memory. It don't store anywhere. It don't use any in memory also. When the data it will fetch from your data source, we are just creating a tabular model. Okay, it's a kind of just a schema or model, whatever. When the data will come, when your Power BI is going to ask a particular data from this tabular model, the tabular model will contact the direct query. So you are writing a DAX queries, right? So the DAX queries, this tabular model will change into SQL query. It will send SQL query to your data source. At that time, when you are sending a request from the tabular model, at that time when you are sending a request from the Power BI to tabular model, the tabular model will convert the the DAX query into SQL query. So it will take the data from your source system, Oracle, SQL Server, whatever, because it is not storing the data inside the in memory. In the first process, the data is already inside the in memory. You don't need to go to the data source and you don't need to process the data. So definitely the second mode will take some time, right? Because it has to take the data from the source system, not from the in memory. The first one will give best performance, but the disadvantage of the first one is you don't get live data. Right? In your source system, this is the OLTP system, for example. So every time whatever the transactions are happening in the banking or in a supermarket will come into this OLTP system. From the direct query mode, it will take the data, whatever exactly live data inside your database. But in the first one, it will take only whatever the data you have inside the in-memory. When the data will refresh in the in-memory, the second time whenever you are refreshing your tabular model, when you are processing again. So this processing we will do by 1 hour or per day 2 times like that. This is not a live data, but the second one is will take the live data. There are some disadvantages of this direct query mode. What are the disadvantages? The disadvantages are you can't create. So there are some features we are missing in the direct query mode. Okay, so that we will discuss once we are starting the training. Okay, so this is about the tabular model advantages and the difference between the multi-dimensional and tabular model.